the animation in this movie is like really the storytelling medium. But the screenplay is by Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman. They are also the writers of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and the Lego and Jump Street franchises, which Jump Street franchise very random, but Lego kind of like makes sense to me in the feel that this movie has, like the personality of this movie. However, they are most known for this movie now because it's such a big deal.
Hi, Court.
And hello, B Critics fam. Welcome to another episode of the B Critics podcast.
In this episode, we are talking about a gem of a movie that I somehow managed to avoid for the last 5 years, which is kind of insane. This movie changed the animation game like forever. And it also is just an amazing story for young adults to have to look up to.
Yes, very fitting that it's the first animated movie that we are talking about on the podcast, because today we're talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
One of Court's faves.
I'm so excited. I just can't hide it.
I'm about to lose control.
Okay, well, if you are like Liz and you live under a rock, here is the story of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So, Miles Morales is just a normal high school kid recently sent to a new magnet boarding school by his expectation-filled parents. In a moment of rebellion, he sneaks off to hang with his Uncle Aaron and throw up some Great Expectations graffiti on the walls of the subway, only to be bit by a radioactive spider while he's down there. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. Oh, I've heard this story before. Radioactive spider, sticks to things, webs randomly shooting out of hands, starts to fight crime, uncle dies, Green Goblin, yada yada. Except this isn't quite that story. It's a unique twist combining the origin stories of several Spider-Verse heroes in a multi-universe way, all of them unexpectedly thrown into Miles' version of NYC. And Miles is the only one who can save the city and send them all home. It'll take a leap of faith, though. Oh, I'm so excited. What a lovely discussion we're going to have. Okay, so this movie came out in 2018, December of 2018, and it's an hour and 57 minutes long, which is very long for the amount of animation that we have in this movie. And it had a $90 million budget. Also incredible about what we're going to talk about in a little bit. And it box office $384 million. Respectable. Ain't
Very
no Harry
respectable.
Potter,
but it's not the highest grossing Spider-Man movie, which is kind of insane to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure one of the newer Marvel ones is with Tom Holland.
Actually, this one's like one of the lowest. The original Spider-Man movies did way better than this one, which is I'm shocked.
Well, this one won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature Film in 2018, which at the time it was crazy because I'm pretty sure it was like the first movie since like 2006 that wasn't like a Pixar or like a Disney movie to win the award. This one was actually produced and distributed by Sony, like Columbia and Sony. So different. And it was directed by three guys. We've got Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, Rodney Rothman. We need to mention, especially in this one, the visual effects supervisor, Danny Dimian. All of them fabulous. We'll talk about the people that created the movie later. And then this movie, in my opinion, has one of the best movie soundtracks literally ever made. We got the gem that is Sunflower by Post Malone because of this movie.
I had no idea that song came from this movie. Like it was made for this movie. I had no idea. I just liked the song.
And I love that it's like not just like a credit song. Like for example, like the Olivia Rodrigo song in the new Hunger Games movie is just a credit song, but in this movie it's like the thread of the movie. Like it's Miles's like comfort song.
I know, it's so cute. He like puts his little headphones on and he's like
I especially like the scene when they're in Alchemex and Peter B. Parker's like relax. Like what do you do to relax? And he just starts like singing it to himself. It is really like
slowly unsticking.
I think like the way that they did that really captured like a teenager at the time that this movie came out, like very, very well.
Yeah,
and
I think they took a lot from Shameik Moore and like the way he was portraying, like as he was doing his voiceovers, like the way his body moved and the way he acted. I think they took a lot from that, and you can tell like Miles moves like a real kid does, like a real teenager. It's really cool. I was impressed.
And I think that they also did a lot of that with like machine learning too. Like they built in line structures to Miles's face, and then they had like a computer program basically like learn like these are the norms of Miles and like what makes him him. So
yeah, I saw too for Miles's character specifically, they took a lot of inspiration from Donald Glover. In Community, in one of the episodes, he wears like a Spider-Man PJ set, and they're like, "That's it. That's what our Spider-Man needs to look like."
Yeah, and he wears like essentially like a Spider-Man PJ set like half of the movie.
Yes.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already mentioned Shameik Moore is Miles Morales, our main character throughout this movie, who incredible. Like couldn't have been cast any better in my personal opinion. And then we have Jake Johnson, who plays Peter B. Parker. And you know who Jake Johnson is, right?
No.
Oh my God. The guy from New Girl. He plays
I haven't seen New Girl. I'm sorry.
Hell. Oh my God. Okay, well, he's funny in that show. And Haley Steinfeld is Gwen Stacy.
I do know who that is.
I like her voice.
Yep.
I don't know who this is, but Mahershala Ali is Uncle Aaron. And then Lily Tomlin is Aunt May. Zoe Kravitz is MJ. And we have John Mulaney as Spider-Ham.
Immediately noticeable. Like, recognizable upon opening Spider-Ham's mouth. I was like, oh, that's John Mulaney.
Yep. And the comedy that goes with Spider-Ham like could only be executed by somebody like that.
Yeah.
Like, it gets better in the next movie. It's so good. It's so good.
So this was John Mulaney's film debut. He'd never been in a movie before.
That's cool.
And they told him, they like kind of gave him free reign. They're like, improvise, like whatever. And so if you know John Mulaney, you know he's like pretty raunchy and he uses a lot of foul language. And so he was just doing that like as they were like recording, and they ended up having to cut a lot of it out because they didn't tell him until later that this was going to be rated like PG. And so he was like, oh. Let me just ruin your movie real quick.
That's okay. They had such like attention to detail and everything. They were probably just like, we'll let him go. Like we'll find some bit of this.
We'll be able to
like
clip it
good
together.
Audio. Yeah. Yep. Nick Cage was Spider-Man Noir. Also,
Courtney, you have like a soft spot in your heart for him. I don't know why.
No, I don't. But I like that he's black and white. It's cool.
It is
and
funny.
Then Catherine Hahn is Doc Ock, and Chris Pine is like the original Peter Parker. Which like he's in the movie for like 2 seconds, and it's Chris Pine.
He was so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that they made Doc Ock a woman. I think that's so perfect. Because like it makes sense for Doc Ock's character, like such a conniving person. Like it was probably a woman anyways. I love that.
I like the character choices that they have for everything. Even that like Miles is like a Black Hispanic person, that they have Gwen Stacy as like a really main character, that they kept like Peter Parker as a thread, but they gave him like multiple personalities options. That they brought in like the manga influence with Penny Parker. Like all of it was just incredible choices by the production team and the writers, and I think it is kind of like what makes this movie feel special.
Yeah, it's super fun. And they did a really good job bringing them all together and not making it like, oh, here's the 5 separate Spider-Men. It was like, all right, like here's the 5 separate Spider people, but they're all the same. But they're all different, but they're all the same. I don't know. It was very cool. I liked it.
Yeah, I agree. It's awesome.
All right, so before we move too far into the movie, we're going to take a second, just a quick little break, to say thank you so much for tuning into our Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse episode. We wouldn't be doing these episodes without you guys, and we're so, so glad that you choose to tune in every single week.
Yes, thank you guys so much. If you are loving what you are listening to, the best way that you can thank us is by sharing the pod with a friend and telling them that our episodes come out every Monday and
every
that they
Monday.
should check it out. And if you are listening, you should subscribe and follow on the platform of your choice so that you don't miss every episode when they come out. Sometimes we drop random episodes. We put all kinds of content out there. Definitely leave ratings and reviews and interact with us on our socials.
Yes, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at bcriticspodcast. We've got lots of fun content, and you can just see what we're up to. We post personal stuff, which is fun too.
Yes, and check out our new partner, Reload. So the Reload app is this brand new app. It's completely free, and you can go on there, you can create an account, and you can find recommendations for movies to stream, find what your friends are listening or watching, what we're watching, so like all your favorite creators, connect with people that love movies, and they have some really cool new things coming out that we'll talk about soon. But if you're interested, you should definitely check it out, and you should use our code to sign up.
Yes. So we will link down in our episode description where you can go to download the app. You can get it on the App Store or in the Google Play Store. But download the app and use our code when you sign up. Our code is BCRIT, BCRIT. So B as in boy do we love Spider-Man, C as in Courtney, R as in race against time, I as in into the Spider-Verse, and T as in the Prowler.
Okay. I think it's time to get back into the episode.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we have a lot to talk about. And I think the obvious place to start is with the animation of this movie because it like you mentioned, it changed animation going forward. And when you watch it, at least me personally, like I was just like in awe the whole time watching it. So the VFX supervisor I already mentioned, Danny Demian, he previously had done Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and Hotel Transylvania. I don't know why we're always talking about Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
I think it's a sign. I think we got to work it into our schedule some way.
Maybe. It's a gem. And then the screenplay, which I think like the screenplay and the animation kind of go hand in hand because the animation in this movie is like really the storytelling medium. But the screenplay is by Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman. They are also the writers of Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And the Lego and Jump Street franchises, which Jump Street franchise very random, but Lego kind of like makes sense to me in the feel that this movie has, like the personality of this movie. However, they are most known for this movie now because it's such a big deal. And then one thing I want to mention too is that there were 177 animators on staff at one point of this movie, which is more than twice normal numbers for like an animated movie. So this was like a huge, huge feat of animation.
Yeah. So one of the big draws, or not draws, but like inspirations that they had was comic books. Obviously, I mean, Spider-Man's a comic. And I grew up with comic books. We've talked about it before. My dad was like a major nerd, D&D, comic books, all the things. And so I inherited all of that at a young age. And I saw all of the inspiration from the way that they like imitated the offset printing imperfections. Like as it's going through, you see like how the outlines kind of like offset from the coloring that happens a lot in comic books. You see whenever like they hit somebody, you see like pow or like boom or like whatever happened, or if like he's like jumping on the walls or whatever, you see the little like whatever. It's just really cool. They did a really good job with it. And I can't imagine how long that must have taken them and how like creative these minds are that were putting this all together is just insane.
Yeah, the
Insane.
stats are crazy. You should look them up. It took them like a week to make like us like 10 seconds of animation. Like I'm not even making that number up. It's crazy. But you're exactly right. The like comic book inspiration is very, very huge in this movie. And Phil Lord said that you should be able to like pause the movie at any time and it should look like a comic book still. And there's even moments in the movie where they have like hand-drawn images that pop up to replace the animation with the shot. They're called like pop frames and they're just like hand-drawn images. So like when Miles is running from the Prowler through the city, there's like a shot where he like goes and like kind of hits a car, and then it like while he's doing that, it just like randomly for like a frame or two, it is this like sketched version of the shot, like a pop frame. But they have a number.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. They have a number of comic book elements. So I'm gonna like name a few. You mentioned a few. So one that is like a huge inspiration throughout the film is the Kirby dots or the Kirby crackle. And so there was this comic book illustrator, Kirby, who made this effect. And so you can see it in comic books and it's used to show like a pulse of energy. And so you see that in this movie whenever they're referencing the collider, like the pulse of energy from the collider.
Yeah.
And so you'll see it in like, especially like the final fight scene, like a ton, like all these dots that are just like coming out of the ground or like around Miles and all the other spider characters. Okay, so next is the line hatching and etching. So that was like a sketching technique in comic books to create shading. So like literally like to make the lines. And so what they would do is they would take like the 3D characters in their animation and then they would just like add like etching or like
The
hatching lines
yeah.
to like make them look more drawn. And then they also used like 3D, 2D manipulation. So they overlaid two-dimensional lines on 3D frames and they utilized automation and like machine learning to do this. So like, for example, I'm looking at a shot here and it's Miles like jumping out like in the final battle scene, but they have like two-dimensional lines like surrounding him to like make him look like 3D like popping out of the screen. So it's kind of like an effect that you would use in a comic book because it's literally a piece of paper as opposed to like in an animated movie.
With the red and blue like overlay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're not even looking at it and it's exactly what it is. And then one that you mentioned is the onomatopoeia. So like the words that will literally like he's like falling and it's like like goes on the screen with him
during the like the big scene, the like main scene of the movie, and he's like doing the free fall and then he like shoots his web up and then he starts like swinging. He's like woo, and it's just like the entire screen is woo.
Yeah, or it's literally like the word like crash or screech and it's like
or like cut the lot.
Yeah. Yep, love that. So many like little moments like that. And then they had influences obviously from other animation styles. So like Miles is the main thread of animation style, but all the other spider characters have a different animation style. So Penny has a lot of manga inspiration. And
I saw they pulled direct inspiration from Sailor Moon, which
that's cool.
Like as soon as I saw her, like that's the first thing I thought of because I was a big Sailor Moon like watcher. I watched Sailor Moon a lot, and I was like, I wonder if they like used some Sailor Moon inspiration here, and they definitely did, which is really cool. I like that.
And one thing I like about it too is that it's not just her animation; they pull it into the way she's written as a character too. Like she's overly emotional and like big with the way she expresses the way she's feeling and she cries and that is like so manga anime to me. I love it.
And she has her little like pet robot.
Yeah. So she's the only character that doesn't actually have Spider-Man powers. So instead of having like webs that she can shoot out of her hands, she has like telekinesis with her spider. and then her spider controls this robot that her dad made for her. And I know, and then it gets destroyed, and it's very sad.
But she gets to keep her spider, so
yeah, that's important.
They can make another robot in year 30, whatever year she came from. 30,
yeah,
whatever.
Obviously, we have Spider Ham that's like very 2D and very, very cartoonish.
He gives Porky Pig vibes.
I like the moment when he says, "That's all, folks," and then Peter B. Parker's like, "Can you even say that?
Are you allowed
legally?"
to say that?
They
did it,
right? And then Spider-Man Noir is black and white completely.
Mm-hmm. And he's like a detective Spider-Man.
Yeah, I like him. And I think he was actually one of the more challenging elements for the creators in the animation.
Well, he's so two-dimensional.
Yeah, so two-dimensional, so black. And I think just the black and whiteness of him was challenging to like maintain the same shadows and stuff that they had. And like there's a scene where all of the spiders are in Miles's room and then his roommate walks in, and so they all like jump up onto the ceiling and they're like moving around so that he doesn't see him. And I was watching this video where the animator said that was like quite potentially one of the most challenging scenes in the whole movie because Spider-Man Noir was so like different animation wise than the other characters.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, so probably the coolest thing about this movie, though, is something really neat that they did with Miles specifically and throughout the whole movie. And it's this like old school animation style where they messed with the frame rate and they animated on twos. So most animation is done nowadays is done with like the 24 frames per second. And like that's how we do like this video too, 24 frames per second, so that it looks like a fluid video. And that's called being animated on ones. And so what that means is that you literally have like 24 frames for every like stills for every single second of footage to make it look like very fluid.
It's like the closest to real life motion.
Yes, yeah. But what they would do is they would purposefully make Miles's animation stepped on twos. So they would have his stills hold for 2 frames instead of 1 frame. So he would kind of look like crunchy.
He was in slow motion. Like he didn't know what he was doing. And he was like awkward.
So the best moment where you can see this, if you want to like go back and watch it, is there's this scene where they're leaving Alchemex. It's Miles and Peter B. Parker.
And he's learning how to swing for the first time.
Yeah, he's learning how to swing for the first time. And they're holding the computer. And so they're swinging through the trees. And so they animate it where Peter B. Parker is animated on ones, so 24 frames per second, and Miles is animated on twos. And so the effect that you have is that Miles looks like really clumsy and crunchy next to Peter B. Parker. And then like as Peter teaches Miles how to swing, they both kind of like sync up together and animate on ones. And
that's cool.
I think it's so cool because like it's so challenging because the background and like the camera frame is animated on ones, and so it's more fluid. So like Miles, because he was animated on twos, would like get out of sync. So they had to do like all these funky things to make it so that everything was cohesive.
Interesting.
And then the last thing I'll talk about is that they did not use motion blur, which is a very common technique used in CG today. So instead, and you already mentioned this, they used the like smear technique, which is a really common like old cartoon technique. And like when you see this, what it looks like is like when for example, when a character's arm is like moving, you'll see like multiple arms
like
in a shot because it's supposed to meant like the images are sort of like smearing together. Yeah. And it kind of made it look more like an old cartoon or a comic book than like the crisp 3D animation that we see typically today.
Yeah, because that's how they would have drawn it in a comic book. They to show the motion, they would have just shown like, and it's kind of like translucent, like the other parts. So you'd have like the arm up here and the arm down here, and then everything in between's like translucent, but you can still see it. And so it's like showing that the arm's moving.
Yeah, literally
really
like
cool.
smeared or like blurred, like
Yeah.
or not blurred, but I just it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that's everything I have about the animation. Yeah, but just in general, I really liked the incorporation of all the elements in this movie. So we've got the animation, we've got, in my opinion, an incredible story.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it's based on, you know, the Spider-Man story, which we've seen 1,000 times and there's a million Spider-Man movies,
Yeah.
this one to me does actually feel very original.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that they wrote his character in, and they went so far as to make it very obvious that Miles is in a different dimension than you're in. So things are named incorrectly. Like there, when he's in Times Square, you see a billboard for Snapchat, but it's called Peekaboo. And like there's a big poster for Shaun of the Dead, but it's called From Dusk Till Shaun. So it's just
That's
like
so
little things
funny.
like that, so you can tell that he's not in your dimension, which I think is important for subsequent movies.
But I do like that just in general, the Spider-Man story is set in a real city, like that it's in New York City, because it makes it like relatable, you know?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
100% agree.
I like the incorporation of all the different origin stories. Like we got that repeated thread over and over, because I think that that is what makes a Spider-Man movie is the origin story feel. And I think that was like a really important element in this one.
Yeah.
And then I also really liked the comedy of this movie. I
It was
thought it was very
funny.
funny.
Yeah, I agree. It had like silly moments, like silly comedy where you're like, haha. But then it also had like legitimate comedy where you like couldn't hold in your laugh. You're like, oh my God.
Like one silly moment is at the end when Miles is defeating Kingpin and he like puts his hand on his shoulder and he's like, hey. Like that's silly, right? Yes. Like that's like a callback. But like the rest of
Kingpin's like, what the hell?
Yeah. But like the moment we already mentioned where John Mulaney is like, it's like, that's all, folks. And they're like, can you even say that? Like that's funny. Like that's comedy that like I like when movies, even though they're geared towards kids, the comedy is not like only for kids. Like I find this movie funny and like watch it again and again and find it funny every single time.
I think kids too find it funny though, and just in a different way, because they don't understand. Like they probably have never seen Porky Pig, like they've never seen Looney Tunes, but like they would think it's funny just because they're like, haha, he's calling it out, like whatever. So
Well, and that's like the Porky Pig thing is just like straight violence, like Super Smash Bros level. Like I'm just gonna hammer. You know what I mean?
He gives him the hammer at the end. He's like, here, it'll fit in your pocket. And he's like, no, it won't.
That's so silly. Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
And like just the way that they use the animation to drive the writing for each character and like how every character was like sort of silly. Like just the invention of like Peter B. Parker as a concept. Like the spider like
they
to have
calling him chunky. They're like, oh, you put on some weight.
Yeah, like to have the Spider-Man that like at the very beginning, like they show like the perfect Spider-Man.
Blonde hair, like all the things.
Yeah. So the movie opens with Peter Parker's origin story, like what you expect. But then like later it's contrasted with Peter B. Parker, who's like
divorced,
chunky, old, gray, divorced. Loses more battles than he wins.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he ends up being like one of the most important parts of the movie, which I think is really great.
Oh, I love it. And I know you don't care, but I love that he's Jake Johnson because that voice is amazing.
Yeah, all the voices were great. Sometimes, and this is just me being like nitpicky because this is how I am, but like with an animated movie, sometimes if the voice doesn't match up with the character, you get out of it a little bit where you're like, oh, like this is not. But I didn't have any of those moments. Like they did a really good job. Not only like picking the right voice actors for each of the characters, but then also making sure that it meshed. So like with the noir Spider-Man. Like he kind of looked a little bit like Nick Cage.
Yeah.
And like the Miles Morales character looks like his voice actor. Like they did a good job, not saying like this is what our character looks like we're going to make these work. They did a good job like bringing the two together, which I really appreciate.
Totally agree. And I think that you're exactly right. Like they had to have taken inspiration directly from the actors in their animation, in the way that they built the machine learning of those characters. Like, I mean, their facial expressions like feel like the way that those actors would have acted.
And I'm gonna call them out a little bit, but I think that's one thing that Disney misses a lot in their animated movies, is making sure that their characters are like realistic and moving the right way. I'm just putting that out there.
I mean,
before we start talking about like the movie, I do want to just like recommend, because I don't think you've seen it and I don't think a lot of people have seen it just because of the timing of when it came out. But if you liked this movie, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is like very similar. The animation style is like looks like the 2D, 3D drawings. The soundtrack is really similar. It's just like the vibes. It's got all the vibes. So if you really like this one, you definitely need to go check that one out too.
Yeah, I've heard that one is like not an underdog, but like it wouldn't be that surprising if it like came in at the Oscars as like a potential nominee. So yeah. Okay, so we already mentioned that the movie opens with Peter Parker's origin story, but then we flip to Miles, who is just a teenager struggling to live up to his dad's expectations. And we open up with the scene where Miles is in his room listening to the Sunflower song, and then he like goes to school and everything.
Yeah.
Which that scene was actually the last one that they animated.
Really? That's cool. I guess it makes sense that they would do it like that.
The song wasn't ready yet.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I really liked that they made Miles a graffiti artist. I thought that was really modern, and like especially for 2018, that would have felt like a little taboo, but it's like would have been like a cool thing to do. It wouldn't have been like, oh, I can't believe he's doing graffiti. Like it was very with the times. That's very, very cool. I like 100%.
I think like 2018 to present is like the time when we're starting to realize that people can be artistic or like have different hobbies and interests, and that's still like cool and okay. But they also did it in a way to show that like he very much still wants to like fit in at school. Like he's very nervous about like people like thinking about him some sort of way or like laughing at him. Yeah.
I liked too. I felt a little bit like we were part of the movie because he kept slapping his stickers on everything and we do that. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah. I like the scene when he goes to school too, and his dad like picks him up on the way, and then he drops him off, and then he's like, I love you, Miles. And like Miles walks away, and then he stops and he's like, Miles,
tell me you love me.
And like in front of everyone.
My parents would have done that. Like if my dad had a like PA system on his car.
No, my parents would have never done that, but I would have come home from school and it would have been like nothing had changed between the drop off and the moment I arrived home. Like it would like I would get back in the car and they would be like, aren't you gonna say I love you back? And I'd be like, that was 8 hours ago. Sorry. Yep. So then he heads off to hang with Uncle Aaron in like a little bit of rebellion, and he makes some Great Expectations, which is the book that they're reading in school, graffiti, when Uncle Aaron like takes him underneath to this like hidden part of the subway system. And then he gets bitten by a radioactive spider.
Yep. Yeah. As soon as we saw the spider, I was like, that's the one. This is the moment. He's going to turn into Spider-Man.
And they make it so dramatic. Like the spider's coming down, like the whole
he crawls around on him for a while.
Like, all around. And then it bites him, and then he's just like flicks it off.
He's like, whatever.
Like it's nothing. But and Also, there's like a little animation bit too when that first happens where they like go through like his blood system, you know?
Mm.
Do you remember that? Where like it
No.
goes through like the cells in his body and kind of like shows like the whatever the spider injected in him like going through his system.
Oh, interesting.
It's a very cool, it's a very like quick bit of animation, but it's
Yeah.
very random and cool. And like
Mm-hmm.
something that like they didn't have to add that, but the fact that these animators made it and they had such an attention to detail, like they had to add it because it's cool and
Yeah.
it makes
Well,
it
and all of the
special.
other ones have that moment where it's like everything's changing and they show it in some visual way. Like they had to.
Yeah.
They had to. Or it wouldn't have been a Spider-Man origin story.
It's so cool though. We'll talk about some things that like you could only do with an animated version of this movie. The live action versions could never achieve some of the things, and that's one of them, right?
Mhm.
Showing an animated version of the inside of your bloodstream is something that would be challenging or unrealistic or take you out of the movie if it was a live action version. But in animation,
Yeah.
you can do like whatever you want to, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so then we go back to school and we've already met Spider-Gwen at this point. So
Wanda.
Gwanda. He met her earlier in school. Well, he didn't meet her name yet, but then
No.
he meets her here. And this is after Uncle Aaron's like, just go up to her and like put your hand on her
Hey.
shoulder and say, hey. And so he does that. And this is when stuff starts to get weird. And his hand sticks to Gwen Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
It gets in her hair. And you can tell she's like, okay, this kid's a spider.
Yeah.
And she's like, just relax.
Yeah.
And he starts creating a scene. And then
they had to shave her head.
They end up in the school nurse and had to shave her.
Can you imagine? Like, what was the explanation? He was like, I don't know, my hand's sticky. And they weren't like, let's use like hot water or let's use like rubbing alcohol. They were like, no, we're just gonna shave the whole head. That's insane.
Well, the reason is because he was like, hold on. I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to pull really hard. And she's like, no,
that's a bad idea.
Do it. Don't do it. And then they cut to her getting her head shaved. So I think he like, what they didn't show is he like ripped his hand off her head and then it ripped her hair out. So they had to shave it because it was like half ripped out.
That's awful.
And I love too that they kept her shaved haircut throughout the rest of the movie.
Well, yeah, it takes place over like a week.
I know, but it's just like, it's funny. It's a detail. Love it.
Yeah.
Yep. So, okay. So that's happening. Stuff is getting weird. Gwen Def knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. So Miles is like, what the heck is happening? So he returns to the subway station where he got bit.
Yeah. He's like, I don't know, maybe I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah. But he finds the collider and just like under the subway, which kind of makes sense, right? That's how like the radioactive spider got him. Mm-hmm. And he witnesses Kingpin, this like giant man,
literally huge, literally massive.
Yeah. And like randomly has like super strength and witnesses him kill Peter Parker.
Like dead. With just like a hit, like one blow, Peter Parker's dead.
I mean, it looked pretty believable. He like smashed his head in. So crazy. Peter, with his like dying breath, gives Miles the USB flash drive to like destroy the collider. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then Miles takes that with him. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else about that scene other than Peter Parker dies.
At this point, this is when Miles decides he's going to go and buy a spider suit.
Oh, yeah. So we get the whole like standard sequence of like Spider-Man realizing that he's Spider-Man. And I like too that like in this one, like they bring so many direct references to the comics because like every spider
he literally reads the comic.
Yeah, he reads the comics and it's literally like gets bit by a spider, starts sticking to things and
like,
can't
what's happening?
Unstick. And he's like, that's happening to me. Like I can't unstick from things.
And he's like ripping the pages of the comic out as he's reading them because he's stuck to them.
Yep. So he goes to the store and buys the spider suit. And that's where we get like the true cameo of Stan Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Which there's actually multiple cameos of Stan Lee in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's one, the only one I know of is like there's one where he's like in the subway in New York as like the subway train like goes by really fast, but I'm sure he's in other moments.
Yeah. So what I saw online, like in an article, was that all of the animators were really excited about having Stan Lee in the movie. And so like a lot of them, like a number of them wanted to animate him. And so they let each of them animate him and put him in different places. So he's like almost every train you see, Stan Lee is sitting in the train.
That's cool.
And when Miles and his uncle are like on the ground, like in the middle of the road. Do you remember that scene?
Yes.
Stan Lee like walks past them. And there's just
That's
like
cool.
a bunch of scenes that he's in. And I'm really glad they did that because this ended up being Stan Lee's like last thing he ever got to do. And so it's really nice that they have that for like his, what's the word I'm looking for? Lasting,
yeah, legacy. Exactly. I was gonna say like this has to be the last thing that he cameoed in because he passed away in November of 2018,
like a month before it came out.
I know, but at least he got to be in it. That's so special.
And he got to like be a part of it and all that stuff, which is really great. I love that. I love that he's been like so involved in all of the portrayals of his comics. Like who else has gotten to do everything that he's gotten to do? It's kind of crazy.
No, he's a legend. Definitely a legend. Rip Stan Lee. Thank you for giving us Spider-Man. We appreciate you.
Forget the rest of them. We only care about Spider-Man.
I mean, we have very well established on this podcast that we're not Marvel people. We're not superhero people. However, there's a few exceptions to that rule. I personally am obsessed with Spider-Man. Obsessed.
We love Spider-Man. He's great.
Yes. And then I like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. They're also good.
Yeah.
And I very randomly like Wonder Woman, but only the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. So then we get the sequence, I'll just mention it very quickly, where Miles is like trying to practice shooting off his webs, just because I think it's so funny when he like goes up the stairwell and then he gets to the top and then it just is like going down the stairwell.
Yeah, he's like, no.
And then he like finds a shorter building and goes up that stairwell, and then he goes to jump off the building and trips off of his shoelace, which is a stylistic choice that he has his shoes untied.
You know that he literally the whole movie, and they bring it up multiple times, and in the scene, like the iconic falling up scene, you can see his shoe untied in that scene.
Yep, I'm sure. It's very funny. Very stylistic. Like, it gives him like a childish aspect for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So then after all of that, Miles eventually meets Peter B. Parker, and we get his origin story, which is hilarious.
We almost kill him.
Yeah, but then Miles saves him. And Peter B. Parker like reluctantly is like, I gotta save this world, I guess, and go stop this collider. Give me that USB stick. And then he's like glitching out because he's like not from the right universe. And so they go to Alchemex together to re-download the USB because in Miles' training he destroyed it. But they end up in a fight with our female Doc Ock. And Miles discovers he's invisible.
He can be invisible, and he can also shock people randomly, which is, I guess it makes sense with the collider.
Yeah, I think it's fun.
Yeah. But I like that they're like trying to like figure out how he does it, and they're like, just do it. And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah. That whole scene is funny, how they're like remembering the password, like, and okay. One thing I love about this scene is that it's very, very classic Spider-Man. So one of the things about Spider-Man that I love is that he's funny. So like he'll be like in the middle of a fight scene and he'll just start like taunting his opponent in like a funny way. And that is very much this scene. Like Peter B. Parker is like chit-chatting Doc Ock. And meanwhile,
he's trying to flirt with her. He's like, let me work my magic.
Yeah, he's flirting with her. And then Miles is over there in the corner,
invisible with the computer,
like trying to type the password, literally turning around the computer screen, like, "What's the last one?" And Peter Parker's like, "Octavia,
8.
you don't look a day over 35." And so then they like try to run out with the computer. You get the little scene with like the bagel, and they're like running through, and
oh, the bagel thing when he throws the bagel and then it literally says bagel.
Yeah.
You don't get the like sound, you get bagel.
So then they leave. You get the like swinging sequence through the trees that we already talked about with the different stepping of the animations, and eventually Spider-Gwen has to save them.
Love Spider-Gwen. I love that she has cutie little teal ballet slippers.
Oh, I know. I'm obsessed
I
with
love her color. I love that she's like bright. It's like most of the well, not most of them. Red and black does not exactly blend in, but I feel like the white like specifically stands out, which I really love.
I think she's so cool. If y'all didn't know, I love Spider-Gwen, and you probably can't tell, but behind me I have a like art that I got from like an artist of Spider-Wen. So
beautiful.
There
love
she
it.
is. She's so cool. And this is her like beginning, but if you love her, watch the next movie for sure, because she is the star of that one.
She's very cool.
Yes. So then they all go to Aunt May's house, and they find the rest of the spider characters in the Peter Parker's shed that's like
basement layer.
I like when Peter B. Parker's like, well, this is, what does he say? This is fancy, or this is pretentious, or something about going in the like souped up shed where it like goes down the elevator into the
they go to like walk
lair.
after the shed, and he's like, the Spidey shed, and it opens up and he's like, oh
yeah, this is way cooler than mine.
Yeah.
And yeah, so they meet Spider-Man Noir, Penny Parker, and Spider-Ham. And they all have this discussion where they're trying to decide if Miles is ready to like help them fight and like return home in the collider. And then Miles gets sad because he can't hone his powers and turn invisible on command. So he
also beat him up.
Yeah, I do forget that they do that. They're like, you handle
the most
a hit?
Important thing is that you get right back up after. And they just keep hitting him. And Peter B. Parker's like, well, I don't know about this.
And then he just turns invisible and leaves.
Poor
and he's
thing.
sad. So he goes to Uncle Aaron's house, and he discovers that Uncle Aaron is actually the Prowler.
That's terrifying. That's so scary.
I know. So he runs back to Aunt May's house. And then Doc Ock and company follow him. And
they're like, you weren't followed, were you? Of course he was followed.
So that little scene in the house is cute too, because I like when Aunt May's, she goes, can we just take this outside? And then they all have the fight inside and literally break out the wall of her home.
Well, she like pushes one of them, the one she told to take it outside. She pushes him out, and she's like, I told you to take it outside. So what I love about Aunt May, and I don't know if you picked up on this, but in all of the movies, Aunt May is played by an Oscar nominee. She is played by a big deal, and Lily Tomlin is an Oscar nominee. And so that's just like continuing the streak of Aunt May being played. Like Aunt May, this like, she's important, but she's also like definitely a side character, but they like have these amazing actresses portraying her. It's incredible.
Well, I think it has to be an amazing actress because she plays Peter Parker's Rock. And so that's a really, even though it's a side character, that's a really important character to the story and to the arc of Spider-Man as a person and his emotions that he goes through in his origin story. So I think
what's really sad about Peter B. Parker is that he's already lost Aunt May.
I know.
And which is probably part of his problem, because she was the one that always like kept him from being an idiot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, like in the real story, does lose Aunt May, and he's fine. He makes it. He defeats James Franco. So then Doc Ock and company, they're attacking. Kingpin kills Uncle Aaron
with a gun. That is so violent.
I know. That's kind of shocking.
That is allowed in this movie.
What is this movie rated, actually?
I don't know.
PG?
I think it's PG-13.
It has to be PG-13. It's like pretty violent.
It's super violent.
Let's see what it is. It is not listed on IMDb. PG.
That's shocking. Because then he points the gun at Miles.
I guess just because it's like
animated and fake.
Animated and like fake enough looking.
I don't know. It's very sad. That makes me really sad.
It is weird how the rating system evolves over time, because like a movie that, you know, they used to rate G, they definitely wouldn't rate G anymore because it has violence in it. But this movie, even, I feel like has a lot of violence in it, and they rated it PG. And I just wonder if like today, you know, only like 6 years later, it's 2024, would, I know, crazy, would have the same rating or not. I don't know. Beats me. However, after Kingpin kills Uncle Aaron, the team escapes, but they leave Miles in his dorm room, and Miles is very sad. And then the team goes off to the collider.
They don't just leave him, they trap him there. And they kind of like set up this scene where they're like trying to figure out if he's ready. And like they're all just standing there like watching him fail. That was really hard. That was hard. That was
this
really
whole section
rough.
of the movie is very emotional, in my opinion, very well written, because it tugs at my heartstrings for sure.
It's very real. Like that's like Miles's dad like coming to the door and like apologizing after losing Uncle Aaron, and like kind of realizing like I don't want to lose you too kind of thing. And like that's like very much, I feel like, something that probably happened in my childhood, that like my dad would have like come to my door and be like, I'm so sorry or whatever.
I think that also makes this movie especially very 2018, because that was the time, like right before COVID happened, where people were starting to be like, therapy is good, like expressing your emotions as a male or whoever you are in society
parenting
is good.
Yeah.
And so they have this arc where Miles's dad goes from like being really hard on him to like finally learning how to express his feelings. And it's really sweet to watch Miles trapped and his mouth covered with web, and he can't talk back to his dad, but to see that like he wants to say back in this moment, I love you too, Dad.
Yeah.
And then to see that this inspires Miles and gives him the strength he needs to then take his leap of faith in the next scene.
Yeah, I love when that scene's happening, they replay his dad's speech that he did, and it's just like he's getting like more and more confident, and just, I don't know, I loved that. I was like, that's very powerful. That's like a very cool thing that they did.
So that scene, the scene that we're talking about, yes, the music. It's this song, What's Up, Danger. It's the first track on the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse soundtrack.
It's kind of like rock and roll a little bit. It's very cool.
It's definitely like very hip-hop too. It's like it's an incredibly emotional build-up in a song too. And you're exactly right. Like in that scene, they call back to different parts of the movie and conversations that Miles has, and then like they reference, I think, when Peter B. Parker is like, you got to take a leap of faith, and then you see
how will I know when I'm ready? He's like, you won't. You just got to do it.
And then he jumps finally. And what's really cool about this moment is in the animation, it's like very off, like all the dimensions are off, so the buildings are actually like 10 times the length of like a normal like New York City building. Like if
they're colorful.
If you like turned the actual scene and like showed what they were working with, like it looks like ridiculous. Like it
Incredible.
looks like the little world and then like the little like buildings that are coming off of it, you know, like super tall, like a video game or something.
Like from a circus.
Yeah. But that scene is amazing. And anybody that I've talked to about this movie who I know loves this movie, people we've had on this movie or on this podcast, like Matt and Ross, like I know that they love this scene in particular too. And I think this whole moment in this movie is what makes it really special and combines like all the animation and the comedy and gives it like a truly emotional character arc and climax to the story is so cool. And just to watch it play out where he makes his, you watch him make his suit too, and then it's black and you're like, oh my god,
and spray
like,
painted. Yeah,
it's very him. It's so cute.
This scene is the heart and soul of this movie. It was in the script from the beginning, so it was one of the only parts that wasn't changed from the script. They knew that they wanted to have this scene, and it was like the primary focus in all of their marketing campaigns. So if like it's on the poster and like it's in all of the trailers, like this was a very important moment that they wanted to make sure was like at the front of everybody's mind when they're thinking about this movie, and they did a really good job with that.
Yeah, you're so right. It is on like all the posters and the marketing material. Yeah.
Everything. And it's pivotal. Like this is the moment where he like truly becomes Spider-Man.
It is so good. So then Miles comes to the rescue at the collider.
They didn't think we needed him, but they did.
Yes. And we get all the Kirby dots and this crazy scene where like the collider's happening and like all these New York cities are coming out and the animation is just wild. And then we see Doc Ock get like hit by a bus.
Katie Heron, it's coming back.
It is. Oh my god.
Mean Girls, we just did that one. And now we're talking about another villain that gets hit by a bus. Sorry, it wasn't Katie, it was Regina George, but
they both get. Oh yeah, no, Katie doesn't get hit by a bus. She almost gets hit by a bus. So then Miles sends all the spiders back to their respective universes. And it's just him versus Kingpin. And his dad is there. Also,
I know his dad was responding to a disturbance complaint.
A disturbance.
Listen, this is when his dad's opinion of Spider-Man changes. That's important because that's a whole other thread for Miles. Because the whole time, like after he gets bitten and figures out he's Spider-Man, he asks his dad. Because remember, he runs home because he's like, I don't know what to do. And then he's like, do you really like you really hate Spider-Man? And that was like important for him and his confidence. So I feel like, I don't know, I love that scene. I love that his dad was there to see Spider-Man like take on this bad guy and like do the right thing.
Yeah, I agree. And then Miles throws Kingpin into the collider kill switch. And Kingpin and his henchmen are all arrested.
The literal largest human being. He's so big. I get it. It's like part of the shtick, but he's huge.
I know. So
And then Miles gets to have the conversation with his dad as Spider-Man.
And he hugs him.
And he says that he loves him, and then he walks away.
I know.
His dad's like, what the fuck?
That's very classic Spider-Man too, because I can remember from the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans when he's like having conversations with people as Spider-Man, like especially with like MJ, and she doesn't know that it's Peter Parker, but she kind of knows that it is in like a weird way.
But he didn't really tell her. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing here. Miles's dad doesn't know that it's Miles, but it also, while his relationship with Spider-Man changes, his relationship with Miles also changes.
Yeah, I love that.
I know. So then we end the movie with Miles's origin story because he's finally come into himself as Spider-Man.
You've heard this story before.
But you haven't.
So I got bit by a radioactive spider.
And it's so cool how they start the movie with, you know, perfect Peter Parker's story, and then they end it with Miles's story, who's not perfect. He's a kid, you know, he had all these differences
along the way.
And yeah. And it makes it so sweet and cute and wholesome that it ends that way, and like not a cliche way. I enjoy it.
Yeah. They did a really good job not making it too cheesy. Like it's just cheesy enough that you're like, oh my God, I love it. But it's not to the point where you're like, all right, like let's move on.
I know. I want to watch it again. I could watch this movie, like this is one of those movies I could watch over and over again. I love it.
Yeah, I agree. When we do Across the Spider-Verse, which we're going to do this year, I'm probably going to do like a marathon and watch both of them back to back because I feel like you kind of have to.
Yeah. You Across the Spider-Verse you could watch standalone, but it would make a lot more sense if you did know what happened in this movie as well.
And it's just fun.
It
4
is
hours
fun.
of movies, why not?
It's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else you want to mention about the movie before we rate it?
I don't think so. I think that's everything.
Yeah, we covered a lot. I talked very fast, so. Okay, Liz, would you like to rate the movie? As a reminder, we rate on Letterboxd with 0 to 5 stars and half-star increments.
I gave this one 5 stars.
I am literally so honored that you think that.
It was
because
really good.
this is one of my favorite movies ever, and I was going to be so sad if you didn't love it, and you loved it.
I did. I watched it all by myself. I had a day off. Hayden had to go to work, and I was like, I'm going to watch this movie, and I laid down and I watched it, and I feel like it's one of the only times like recently that I've watched a movie at home, like not a movie at a theater, where I like wasn't on my phone, I wasn't doing other things, like I was just like glued into this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And it was really good. I loved it. Everything about it. I mean, we talked about it already, but the animation style, the soundtrack. I'm in love with Miles Morales. Like,
I know.
he's just fantastic. They did an amazing job, and I'm glad that they're continuing it. And we have a second one, and we're going to have a third one next year. And yeah, just a great movie, great story. And I'm glad that like the young people, I mean, we're still young people, but the young people have these movies to watch because they're just fantastic.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. And you're not going to believe this, but I honestly think that the second movie is better than this one.
I
Which
believe that. I
is
do believe it.
crazy because I remember watching it and like my eyes were just glued to the screen. It was
I remember when
crazy.
you went to see it and you like told me about it afterwards, and you're like, Elizabeth. And I still haven't watched it. So.
Well, we'll get your raw reaction in the pod. Okay, well, if you haven't been able to tell already, I also rated this movie 5 stars, and we'll rate it 5 stars probably every time I watch it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
loved it.
Big rewatchability, which I feel like is really important for you when you're rating movies. So
100%.
All right, so we have some write-ins.
Oh, I'm excited. I am.
And yeah, they're all good. So the first one I'm going with is from Never Ending Watch List, and they said incredible animation, great story building, and likable, realistic characters. Very unique overall. Totally agree.
Totally agree.
The next one, Dan Loves Film, which I'm so glad he wrote this in because it goes along with everything that we said. We spent a lot of time talking about the animation, but he said completely changed the game when it comes to animation. 100% agree. 100%.
Yeah, I also 100% agree. I feel like this has set so many bars for me with animated movies. Like I didn't know an animated children's movie could be this good. And now I'm like, okay, well, I have expectations.
Yeah, you better meet them.
Great expectations.
Oh my God. The next two are just, they're like along the same line, so I'll just read them back to back. But Tom's Movie Madness said absolutely amazingly perfect. And then Film versus Film podcast, Martin said the best Spider-Man movie, period.
I honestly would agree with that, which is saying a lot because I feel like the original Spider-Mans with Tobey Maguire are a huge part of my childhood. But I think these movies have so much more rewatchability.
Well, and it's just modern. Like as good as a Tobey Maguire movie is, like it's going to date. And these movies will date too, but for right now, they're still like the best thing that we have. So
yeah,
it is what it is. All right. So moving on to the world. This has stellar reviews. Stellar. So the Letterboxd average, which I think this is a little bit lower than it should be, but it's got a 4.4 out of 5, which may be the highest we've had on here.
I've never seen a Letterboxd average that high. That's so high.
I just can't imagine anyone not rating this a 5 out of 5. Like if you didn't give this 5 stars, like you're just being a Scrooge. That's my thought.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you like really hate Spider-Man or something, but also like, why are you watching this movie?
There's no way. Yeah, don't go be a curmudgeon somewhere else. The tomato meter is a 97. Hell yeah. And the audience score is a 94. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Amazing. IMDb is an 8.4, which is really good. It's a little low in my opinion, but it's still really good. And then the Google users, they surprised me. I don't know how Google gets their numbers, but they said 83% of Google users like the movie. I don't know who's going on Google and saying they didn't like this movie, but I don't want to be friends with you if you did that. So,
agreed.
Yeah.
Just stay away from being friends with me if you didn't like it. I'm good. Pass.
Yep.
I'm glad you liked it, Liz, because we can stay friends.
I loved it. Yeah. Imagine if I came out and was like, I gave it 2 stars. Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
Who does
it'd be
that?
a moment for us. It's okay. We've had to rethink some things, kind of, probably.
I don't think so. That'd be like really poor movie taste if I was like, I didn't like this. That would be really bad. It would be okay if you judged me for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's all
I
of
think
it.
that's it too.
That's a wrap on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And next week, we're talking about a very new movie that I'm very excited to talk about, but it is Wonka. So it's the Willy Wonka origin story. It's kind of a musical. There's a lot of music in it, lots of singing and dancing.
It's a musical.
But I'm very excited to talk about it. I think it's going to be really fun. And yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it.
Yep, if you haven't seen it, you have 1 week to watch it because we're going to be talking about it next week. And be sure to subscribe and follow us wherever you get the podcast so that you don't miss it when it comes out. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts.
Yes, you can. And that's it. And so we'll see y'all next Monday.
Bye, guys.